Hey guys, this video we're going to have a look at data structures. More specifically, we're going to have a look at the list data structure. So a list is a collection data type. In Python, there are four main collection data types: lists, tuples, sets, and dictionaries. A list is the one which you'll probably use the most, and what makes it different from the others is that it's ordered, mutable, which means that it can be changed after it's been defined, and it allows duplicate members. In Python, lists are denoted using square brackets. So I can make an empty list by giving it a name, my list, and putting empty brackets. I can also initialize a list with a few elements. So I can make a list for student names and put comma-separated elements within the brackets. Lists also allow different types. For example, I can have a list of both integers and strings. So I can have my list stuff, which has a string and an integer and a float as well. Cool, so that's the basics of how you initialize a list. To access items in a list, you use square brackets and provide an index. For example, students 0 will give me the first element, and students 1 will give me the second. You can use this same syntax to change the value of an item at an index. So I can say students at index 2 and change the value of the item at that index. So if I print students now, I can see that the third element is different to before. Python also has an operator called the slicing operator that lets us extract sections from lists. It's a way of accessing a list by specifying a starting index, ending index, and a multiplicative factor. So I've initialized a list called myList with all the letters A through J. Say I want all the elements in this list from index 1 to index 4. I can do myList and specify a starting index, so 1, an ending index, so 4, and specify a step factor, so I'll just put 1. And as you can see, it's given me the elements B through D. If I leave out the third number, the step has a default value of 1. So if I do my list of just 1:4, it'll give me the same thing. We can also leave out the first number since this defaults to 0, so the beginning of the list. So if I do my list 4, it'll give me from the beginning of the list to index 4. And similarly, if I do my list 4 : and don't provide an end value, it defaults to the end of the list. So this will give me everything from index 4 to the end. Finally, we can apply a step factor. So say we want elements from 0 to 6, but only every second element. I can do my list 0, 6, and a number 2 for the step. So it's given me every second letter. I'd recommend you have a play around with this feature in your own Python shell to get the hang of it. So next I'm going to introduce a few built-in functions for lists in Python. The first one is to find the length of the list. We just type len and provide the list in the brackets. The second one is append. So say I want to add a new element on the end of the list. I type the name of the list, so my list dot append, and I can pass a new element to the end. So say I want to put K on the end of this list. Typing my list again, you can see that the list has been updated. The final one is to remove an element from the end of the list. We can use the pop function, and pop actually returns the element which was removed. So say I say x equals my list.pop. If I print my list, you can see that K has been removed, and if I print X, you can see that it now has the value for the letter K. There's more list and data structure related functions. If you're stuck on what functions exist, you can also look at the docs. So there's plenty more functions here. For example, we have insert to put an element at an index rather than append, which just always applies it to the end. And remove, which allows you to pass in an index which removes an element at that specific index. Next, we're going to have a look at how to iterate over a list of elements in a list. In a previous video, we saw how to write a range-based for loop in Python. So if I wanted to loop over a list using a range-based for loop, I could write for I in range. And for the range, I'll use the length of the list. And then I would use this index I to index into my list and print that element. So element equals my list of I and print element. Over on the right hand side, I'll run this program and you can see it's printed every element in my list. Python has a simplified way of iterating through lists by element rather than by index. So I could do for letter in my list and print the letter. So I'm just going to comment out the print statement above and run this again. So as you can see, this has done the exact same thing. So in the body of the loop, I have access to the actual letter rather than an index, which I use to index into my list. This is really useful as it makes your code much easier to read and also helps prevent off by one errors. Okay, last thing we're going to cover is list comprehensions. This is a really cool feature in Python that lets us create lists in a very concise way. The syntax for this is within square brackets, you put an expression followed by a for clause. So I can say for x in another list. So it'll evaluate this expression on the element x for each element in a list. A simple example is to construct a list of numbers from 1 to 9. I could do my numbers equals x for x in range and give 1 to 10. Typing my numbers again, I can see this has given me a list of numbers from 1 to 9. We can also add one or more if clauses after the for expression into these list comprehensions to only conditionally add an element into the list. So say I only want the even numbers from 1 to 9, I can say my numbers equals x for x in range from 1 to 10 if x is divisible by 2. So if x mod 2 equals 0. So we'll print my numbers again, and we can see that we have the same thing, but only the even numbers this time. Finally, let's make a copy of this list, but each of the numbers halved. So we'll make a new list, halved numbers equals, and we want each element from my numbers, but divided by 2. So I'll say x divided by 2 for x in my numbers. So you can see that it's given me the half of each number. Okay guys, that's all for this video. Hope you learned something. Thanks for listening.